Recording in progress.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. I'm your host, the Game Master, or GM for short. And this video is not going to be like the other videos I've done. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we met Dean Cain last Saturday, and we got him to play the game very, very briefly. He was in Salem, Ohio on September 9th. Salem, by the way, is just down the road from where that train derailed about a year ago. So that was kind of interesting. I kind of told my family when we were going there, um, it might not be a good idea to like eat or drink, there when there's all these chemicals in the groundwater. So we kind of packed a lunch and took bottled water with us and stuff like that. And when we got there, um even before we put the windows down, I started to smell a funny smell about maybe half an hour or 20 minutes out. And I asked the family a couple times, like, what is that smell? And they weren't sure. And then when we pulled into town, it's a really small town. When we pulled into town, I rolled the windows down and there was this smell in the air, and it was kind of like when you're at a gas station and you can smell gas fumes. It was a little bit like that, and it also smelled to me like vaguely like roadkill. Like not an overwhelming, powerful smell, just kind of a smell. And I don't know how long we were there before we really didn't smell it anymore then. Um, Something else I think that helped with that is the convention is in an old school. So they had it locked up for a really long time. Basically, when there's no convention going on, nothing's happening in this school building. So I think the air in there was actually kind of like stale air from before the train wreck. At any rate, I'm just saying because I know a lot of my friends were kind of talking about the train aspect of it. And I think that was kind of a shadow hanging over the convention this year. Last year, we went there and we met John Wesley Shipp, and we got him to play the Flash in our game. And earlier, we had Corey Burton play Brainiac, which he was the voice of Brainiac on Superman the Animated Series. John Wesley Shipp played the Flash back in the early 90s on the Flash TV show. He played various Flash-centric characters on the recent CW shows. So Corey Burton had basically ripped off the plot of Colossus the Forbin Project. And then John Wesley Shipp essentially used super speed and hacking to solve the problem. And so we had learned from that experience that giving celebrities, like, how do I want to put it? Like, they aren't gamers. They're not used to thinking along those lines, right? So everybody felt kind of out of their element when we had done it in the past. So I decided months in advance that I was going to try to give Dean Cain a really easy thing to do as Superman. So I'll get to that in a minute. At any rate, when we met John Wesley Shipp last year, though, there was a huge turnout, right? And I think that the train thing really made people not want to go. I think people were really scared of the chemicals, and I get it. My family had a very long conversation, really over the course of a year, about whether or not we thought we should go. Um, and so we made the choice to, well, let's go, but let's, you know, pack a lunch basically. Point being, big turnout last year. Nobody was there this year. I would say they only had about a fourth as many vendors as they did last year. Um, way fewer guests. I mean, really, the hallways were empty. You just kind of see the occasional person walking around. So the downside is the convention part of it, as far as buying stuff, having a nice experience with other fans, that was almost kind of like non-existent. Um, the whole time I was there, I barely spoke to anybody. Everybody was just kind of quiet and keeping to themselves, and so on and so forth. The upside of that, though, is because it's kind of a drive for us. I forget what it is, maybe 2 hours. I think I'm about 2 hours west of there. Um, so when we leave in the morning at 8 o'clock or something, and I mean, we didn't even leave that soon. We left probably at 9, and then we stopped at a Walmart to get the stuff for our lunch. So by the time we got there, it was around noon, right? And and so he was taking a lunch break. And kind of like the last time too, for the most part, everybody sees the celebrity before lunch, and then a lot of them go home. And so if you meet the celebrity after lunch, you have more time with them, right? And plus, like I said, there wasn't a huge turnout, so we had more time there too. And at any rate, so there was a line after lunch to meet him, and there were some people ahead of us in line, and so they go up and they meet him, and there was something else that was kind of interesting about it. My son has never seen Dean Cain's show. What was it called? The New Adventures of Lois and Clark. My son and my daughter, neither of them have ever seen it. Um, Neither of them even knew what Dean Cain looked like. And so something I thought was very interesting was, at one point Dean Cain walked by my son in the hallway, and my son, who I would say he's very low energy and like apathetic 99% of the time, kind of turned around and looked at him. He goes, "That's Superman." I thought that was interesting. Dean Cain has an interesting kind of like a vibe, you know. Um, so at any rate, we go in to meet him, and so the line is shaped kind of like a letter U, and there's not too many people ahead of us. There's not, hardly anybody behind us either. Um, and so he's taking his time with kind of everybody. And again, because there's such a low turnout, he wasn't hesitating to maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes with each family, right? So he does that with the people in front of us, and he is very professional, very polite. He's a perfect gentleman, so on and so forth, right? It's kind of the sort of thing you would expect. And um, so it gets to be our turn, and I walk up to him, and he stands up and he shakes my hand, and I introduce myself as Chris Kent. That's my real name. And he goes, "Seriously?" And I go, "Yeah." And he's like, "Kent, you're a real Kent." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's what's on my driver's license." And I kind of laughed, and then he kind of laughed, and this is where this weird kind of thing starts happening, where I kind of tell a joke and it gets him laughing a little bit, and then he tells a joke and it gets me laughing a little bit more, right? And we're kind of like egging each other on. It was very interesting. And it's like last year, I got along really well with John Wesley Shipp. Um, like at one point, he's answering audience questions, and he came over and stood next to me, and he put his hand on my shoulder and stuff like that. And so on the ride home last year, I said, "That's kind of weird." He'd kind of like singled me out. That's pretty neat. So this year, the thing was that everybody in my family thought Dean Cain reminded them of me, not physically at all. We don't look anything alike, but just in terms of sort of like our sense of humor, our energy level. Um, there's a certain like mischievousness or orneriness, right? I was not expecting that at all. And he had not done that with the earlier families. So at any rate, he was really surprised my name was Kent. And I don't know how to put it. I don't I I don't know if it's like he's so connected with this character that he identifies with Superman, and then my name is Kent, and then yeah, it sounds a little stupid, but I'm sort of wondering out loud, right? Was that what caused it? Like, I don't know, right? I don't know. But so then he adds to it, and like I introduce my family, I say this is my wife and this is my son, and he's also, named Chris Kent the second. And Dean Cain puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, my father's name was Christopher, and my son's name is Chris. And I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah, like what a coincidence or whatever. And man, we just hit it off. It was, and you can kind of see this is a picture my wife took of him. This is him signing the GM screen for DC Heroes. And you can kind of tell by the look on his face that he's been laughing. He's having a really good time. He's engaged, right, in the conversation. Um, and at any rate, so I ask him, I say, okay, so we're getting celebrities to play the game. And he's like, awesome, let's do this. And I was like, great. I was like, do you know how to play? He's like, nope. I'm like, that's fine. I'm gonna give you an easy one. And I'm like, okay, so the character you're playing is Superman, obviously, right? He's like, yep. And I was like, so just it's your day off. And he's like, okay. And he starts kind of touching his chin and he starts thinking. He's like, okay, okay. And I go, so it's your day off and there's nothing you have to do. And so he looks at me, he goes, there's no crime to fight. And I go, we're trying to give you an easy thing. I don't want to have to give you something like go bring about peace in the Middle East or something hard. Let's just assume you have a day off and what would you do with that time? Because in my mind, if it's anything other than a day off, right, that involves him knowing some rules, that involves us rolling dice, right? You see where I'm going with that? So we don't want to have to have him contend with that. We want him to have a little fun with it too. So he says, cool. I want to go find Wonder Woman. And I was like, okay, you do. And he's like, I check her out with my X-ray vision. And that was it. That's all he wanted to do. And he was like, yep, we're done. Um, so um I was blown away by his answer. I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was interesting too. We were talking later. He used to date Brooke Shields. I think they were engaged for a little while. And interestingly enough, one of the DC direct to video animated movies that they did, they got Brooke Shields to be the voice of Wonder Woman. So I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Um, so at any rate, we hung out with him for a while. It seemed to me, I mean, I don't know, I wasn't looking at a watch. It seemed to me like we stood around and talked with him for like 20 or 30 minutes. And um he was just he was having fun. He seemed like a super nice guy. Um we took some selfies with him, which I posted on social media. Uh we got him to sign the GM screen. Um so I thought that was cool. Um yeah. So then the whole drive home, we actually just, again, I know I'm mentioning the train thing a lot, but I mean, it's a huge deal for those people. They actually, there's the local, I don't even know what you would call it. There's kind of a little indie film kind of a thing in that general area, and they are starting to make a superhero show. They had a girl there. It was like a blonde girl, and she had kind of like a metallic blue, like one piece swimsuit kind of thing on. It was her superhero costume. And then she had a chemical element sign on her chest. And I'm looking at that. And to me, it looks vaguely like something from the Legion of Superheroes. So I go up to her at one point. I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I was looking at your cosplay and everybody else here, which like there was a ton of Batman. There were a handful of Supermen, but there were like, I bet we saw maybe 10 guys dressed up as Batman, which is a lot for, like I said, for such a small turnout, right? And we saw there was a Catwoman. She looked a lot like the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, kind of like at the end of the movie when she takes her mask off and she's got blonde hair and everything. Um, she looked like that, and then she had a kid, like a toddler with her, and they'd done the kid up to look like the Heath Ledger Joker. There was Darth Helmet from Spaceballs. There was I don't know. There were various things there. There was a Wonder Woman. Um, but so I see this one woman cosplaying as this character, and I went up to her and I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I just I recognize every other character here today. I have no idea who you're cosplaying as. What am I overlooking here? And they explained that unlike everybody else, that they're mimicking something they saw in media. These guys were making their own media. They were making a movie. And interestingly enough, the train thing is such a big deal here. That is supposed to be this superheroine's origin story, is the train wreck. So the symbol on the chest is actually the chemicals that were in the train wreck. Um, but I thought that was interesting it's such a big part of their local culture. You know what I mean? So at any rate, we're driving home and I kept telling everybody, don't eat or drink anything here. And one member of my family got a fountain drink, got a Coke, and they took one sip of it and were like, "What?" And I was like, "What's wrong?" And they're like, "I got like it tastes funny." And so I just took a tiny sip just to see what they were talking about. And for the rest of the day, I kind of felt like there was an oil slick or something in my mouth, like just like a layer on my tongue, and like like if you would lick a one of your teeth or something, you would taste this kind of almost like a gasoline kind of a taste. I was like, bleh. And so we poured it out, obviously, and just barely had enough in your mouth to get a taste of it, both of us. And yeah, so that whole area is really messed up. But um, the the upside of which, I hate to say this, maybe I'm being a jerk by mentioning this. Where I live, this year is like the record-breaking worst year ever for mosquitoes. And everywhere I go, which is, I live in the country, but if you drive, 30 or 40 minutes in any direction, you hit a city, right? And all of those places are just a ton of mosquitoes this summer. But yeah, that was the upshot of going to this convention, is we got to be outside for pretty much the first time all summer and not have a single mosquito bite us. So obviously that's bad. I assume they don't have bees and stuff either. I mean, all the plants looked fine. I was kind of wondering. I thought maybe we'd get there and everything would be all wilted and stuff, but things looked pretty much fine. At any rate, so on the drive home, I was just blown away by how Dean Cain acted. Like it wasn't what I expected. Um, like it was kind of cool, but then I kept saying, I don't know if we can use this in the game because Superman would never do that. And and I thought, well, I mean, we could do an alternate universe. Something I do sometimes is I'll say it's Earth. Like since we went there on 9/9 of 23, I might say that takes place on Earth 550-230909, right? And just say on that Earth, Superman is like squirrely and you know. The other thing we talked about doing is we said, well, maybe it takes place in our in a more traditional setting, with a more traditional Superman, um, and maybe we blame it on red kryptonite because I figure red kryptonite can. In recent years, it's more about like bad behavior. If you go back to the Silver Age, though, which is kind of what we lean to a little more, red kryptonite really can kind of do whatever you want it to do. You know, it can turn Superman into a giant ant or Frankenstein or anything. You know, so yeah, we thought it'd be kind of funny if the Dean Cain Superman was just a red kryptonite story, and that's why he was bothering Wonder Woman. Um, but yeah, that was the trip. So I don't have kind of like an official game story this week. We didn't do any gaming going to the Comic-Con, really pretty much took up our whole day. Um, so yeah, I don't have a normal video for you, but I wanted to let you know what we did do. It was clearly game related. We will have to decide, we'll probably plug it into a different game. Instead of it being its own game, it'll probably just be like a scene in something else we do later. But we're like I say, we're trying to figure it out. Um, because it does seem out of character for Superman. But yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. We had a fun time going. I'm curious to see, first of all, if they even have a convention next year, or did the one this year do so badly that maybe this is it for the Salem Comic Cons? This is only the second one they've ever had. The one last year with the Flash, that was the first one they ever did. So maybe that'll be it. But yeah, I have two signatures on the GM screen. We got Flash and Superman. Um, Last year we were going to go to Columbus, and Kevin Conroy was supposed to be in Columbus last, I think it was October, and he passed away a week before the convention. So we didn't go, obviously. But it was actually really weird. There were a bunch of other people who were supposed to be there, like Jason David Frank, who was the on Power Rangers. He passed away like right before the convention, I think. Um, like at the last minute, the convention, which I think that one's called Galaxy Con, they announced basically like a ton of the people who were supposed to be there dropped out at the last minute. So at any rate, yeah, I don't know who we're gonna get. I would love to get Linda Carter to sign it. I don't know where I'm ever gonna meet her at though. Um, but yeah, it would be great if we could get her to sign as Wonder Woman. We need a Batman for sure. Um, and we were gonna get Kevin Conroy, so I don't know. I don't think I'll ever meet Michael Keaton. He'd be the other guy who comes to mind. I actually met Adam West back in the day, but I wasn't thinking about this stuff at the time. I was playing the game, but not having anybody sign anything back then. So I met Adam West and Frank Gorshin, and I didn't get a signature from either of them. At any rate, I'm rambling, so I'm going to shut up. I hope that you enjoyed hearing this story. As always, thank you so much for helping support the channel. Thank you for growing it. As always, if you have a minute, we'd really appreciate it if you hit like and subscribe and rang the bell and left a comment, all that jazz. And we'll see you next time. Bye.